It is a tradition that he composed the well-known prayer, "The Soul of Christ, sanctify me," which was a favorite one of Saint Ignatius, who introduced it into his book of spiritual exercises, though leaving out the lovely petition, "Light of the sacred countenance of Jesus, shine down upon me," which is found in the old forms of the prayer. This petition occurs in the version of the Anima Christi, found in an old prayer book called the York Hours, where it is stated to have been indulgenced by Pope John XXII when said after the elevation at Mass. This prayer book was published in 1517, 4 years before the conversion of Saint Ignatius. 3. Personal traits. Saint Thomas was tall and inclined to corpulence, with a fine massive head, a lofty forehead, refined and handsome features, and large, gentle eyes beaming with benevolence. His manners were singularly winning and graceful, and his prodigious powers of mind were accompanied by a childlike simplicity of character, which, no less than the purity of his doctrine, gained for him the title of the Angel of the Schools. Though raised so high above others by his gigantic intellectual powers, he was the sweetest and most charitable of masters and of fathers, always ready to stoop to the capacity of the youngest and dullest of his scholars. No matter how important the affair might be on which he was engaged, his cell was always open to his brethren whenever they wished to speak to him, and he would cheerfully turn from the most absorbing occupation to give them his undivided attention. He listened to their difficulties, explained their doubts, and comforted them in their troubles. Nothing that concerned them was trifling in his eyes, and he never showed himself weary of their interruptions and importunities. In return, they bore him the tenderest affection. Dr. Noster, they loved to call him, and the sincerity of their attachment was amply proved by the bitterness of their grief when he was taken from them. Long after his death, those who had known him could never speak of him without tears, so dearly did they love him. True son of Saint Dominic, he cared only to speak of God, or to God, and could not understand how religious could take interest in any other topic. If the conversation turned to other subjects, he ceased to take part in it, and he owned to his companions that it surprised him that a religious could think of anything but God. And what was perfectly incomprehensible to him was, how anyone who knew himself to be in the state of mortal sin could eat, sleep, or be merry. When seculars came to seek advice and consolation from him, he lent them a willing ear, and after solving their doubts and consoling their sorrows, he never failed to tell them some short pious story or to speak a few words of edification, and then dismissed them, their hearts glowing with spiritual joy and divine love. We can picture St. Thomas to ourselves enjoying his ordinary recreation of walking up and down the cloister of his convent, occasionally dragged off by his brethren to take a breath of fresh air in the garden, but sure in such cases soon to be found in some remote corner, absorbed in thought. Of this abstraction of mind, some amusing anecdotes are preserved, as for example, that which shows him to us dining with St. Louis, and suddenly striking the table with his hand, exclaiming, "It is all up with the Manichees." His companion gently endeavored to recall him to the remembrance of the royal presence, whilst the good-natured king instantly summoned a secretary to commit to writing the convincing argument which had just presented itself to the mind of his saintly guest. Again at Naples, when the cardinal legate and the Archbishop of Capua came to visit him, he went to the cloister to receive them, but on the way became so absorbed in the solution of a theological difficulty, that, by the time he arrived, he had forgotten all about the business and the visitors that had called him, and stood like one in a dream. The Archbishop, who had formerly been his pupil, assured the cardinal that these reveries were perfectly familiar to all who were acquainted with the saint's habits. This abstraction of mind at times rendered him insensible to pain, as for example, when a wax candle once burnt his hand, while he remained in thought, unconscious of the pain.